Welcome everyone. Call to order the January 12th meeting of the Eastham Energy and Climate Action Committee. This meeting will be video recorded, broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. All right, so let's get started. We have a special meeting today with some special guests here, although I feel they're part of the family now. I'm just saying we kind of missed all the great activity over the summer as it ramped down and you all dove into to do document writing, which was very noble and based on what we're seeing, it does an amazing job. But we'll get to that in just a second. First, why don't we do a quick around the room introduction? Let's hit the members first. I'm Tom McNellis.
Roberta Longley. Harriet Emerson.
And Mike
Sarcioni.
and John.
John Boyney.
And then we'll scoot around to our supporters and volunteers and liaisons. So I'll go around the circle here. Cheryl
Cheryl Gale.
and Jack.
Jack Hadley, a volunteer.
Shane is here in person. We appreciate
Shane
that.
Brogan.
Gary Senecal, volunteer.
Clark Judy, Cape Cod Commission Special Projects Coordinator.
Elaine Didra, Cape Cod Commission and Special Project Coordinator.
And Steve Tupper, Cape Cod Commission Deputy Director.
And hi, I'm Eleni Carr, Eastham Climate Action Committee.
All right. So our quote for today, I thought this was kind of an interesting one. This is from Nito Quibben. Your present circumstances don't determine where you can go, they merely determine where you start. And I think kind of a cool thought as we kind of see the beginnings of the release of the Climate Action Plan and a lot of great stuff for Eastham to be focusing on. Couple really quick items before we jump in. This will be really fast. Appreciate all the goals discussion from last week. What I was going to do once we got past the review of the CAP, the Climate Action Plan document, just send out a request for all the folks that have taken on goal ownership and just to update the plan based on the volunteers and the assignments and the self-assignments and maybe just sketch out some dates and any updates based on what we talked about. When I was over at the COA today, Dorothy asked if we could do a Eastham Focus Talk on April 9th, some more detail about that. I thought we could kind of focus on similar to what we did at Northwood Fellowship, and I appreciate that Harriet came out to support it. Gary was there, and John Mulgeridge. We had a really good discussion. It was kind of a climate conversations. What can you do? So, although that one I kind of put together at the last minute and did. Wasn't able to get everyone to take a crack at it. I'd like to do the COA one, maybe is a little bit more, collaborative, and I'll get that out for everyone to take a crack at. All right. With that, Shane, I don't know if there's any additional items you wanted to talk about from an administrative standpoint.
Not since Wednesday, other than the paperwork, we got the contract back from DEP. And so we're working on processing the paperwork for the EV charging stations. So that's in the works with the accountant.
And that's the level 2 replacement. Excellent. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. And public comment. We have a few guests here, so I just wanted to open the floor for any public comments for items not on the agenda. All right. And we'll jump right in and, very happy and honored to have Cape Cod Commission here with us today. They're really the experts in this field, and you can see it in the document that was produced. Very, very impressive. And Steve is going to go through a little bit of introduction for us today. So I think this is kind of a high level. I'm sure you'll give us an idea of how we can help as we get towards the public comment period. An emphasis, I think, that this is not a public hearing per se. It's kind of for the committee here to to ask questions, to gain understanding, give any thoughts and insights into what you've seen at the top level. And I think Steve will guide us through what the more detailed comment period will look like. So with that, turn it over to Steve.
Very much, Tom. Thank you for everyone here joining today, in person and virtually. I will bring up the plan on the screen so we can all see it and walk through it. But just wanted to start with a little bit of context setting first. And before I do that, I want to certainly acknowledge others that worked on this plan. So that fucking Lorraine here today, also many other members of the staff contributed to the report, so I get to be here talking about it. But with a lot of us to get together, and certainly hopefully you're impressed with some of the graphics. We had our graphics team working on this, so it looks as good as the content is as well. But to echo some of Tom's early comments, this is an important touch point of the committee, but I want to make sure it's clear this is not your only opportunity to give feedback on this plan. You know, it was in all of your hands on Friday. I didn't expect you to spend the weekend. I got a football game to watch and some other stuff going on. So happy to kind of bring you up to speed with our plan going forward, take any initial feedback or thoughts now. But really the point of coming to the committee now was to get this in your hands early ahead of the 30-day public comment period. So you'll have now until well into February to dig into the details. Having worked with some of you already, I know you'll give me some detailed feedback and that's great. But I want to make sure you don't have to do that today. We've got plenty of time to dig in. But what I do want to do is give you a sense of where we're going from here so you can understand next steps and how the feedback tonight fits into that. So what you have in front of you is a draft climate action plan that reflects everything that we have heard throughout this engagement process. So that includes community engagement, includes meetings of this committee, includes watching some of your previous meetings. I'm one of those members that watches those. We are some of those members watching your YouTube meetings. It includes a lot of one-on-one conversations we had with town departments and other organizations in town. And specifically, it involved a round of town staff review. So the document that we're going to go over today, very kindly, Shana was able to coordinate the town staff feedback. So there's already been a round of feedback by town staff. So it's already gone through that process. Wanted to make sure that they had a hand on it before we went to public comment. I want to say departments could potentially be involved in something. We want to make sure they see it. So it did take some time. I appreciate everyone's patience on all of that process, but it's taken time to get to where we are today. So what I'm hoping today is to be able to orient you to the document to describe how the feedback translated into this draft plan. And then as we go through, I'll pause and talk about some of the logistics in the plan. After today, we're gonna work with Shana on getting this document out for public comment. Acknowledging that we want to have plenty of time. If as a committee you want to meet again and talk it over, that'll be built into the process as well. So the plan would be to put this out in the next couple of weeks and then give a full 30-day review period. So likely that'll be through the end of February. We'll work on the details when press releases go out and those sort of things. But at least 30 days, you guys have more than that to the document. So that's kind of where we're heading. And then we'll take all of that feedback we get during the public comment period. We'll include feedback from the public, but include feedback from the committee, but include feedback from individuals in the committee. Any of those variations, we'll bring all that feedback back before we work on a draft that gets to the select board. So that's ultimately our trajectory on that. I want to give you a sense of where we are in the process. We are nearing the end of the process, but we still have time and certainly still have time to make edits before that. So there might be so much trying again to get it.
Yeah.
Any feeling for timing in terms of post public comment period and getting to select board simply because of scheduling purposes, so we can start thinking about getting on their agenda future?
Absolutely. I've been talking that over with Shana and certainly we'll defer on whatever that fits into the select board's agenda.
And I've been talking it over with Jackie and tried to get on there March 2nd, I believe it is, tentatively, so we're penciled in for that one.
Great.
So that's where we're going overall. Unless there's any context questions, I'm happy to bring it over. And I think as we talk through it, we'll talk some logistics. I know this committee's interested in how this gets implemented, and we'll definitely get into that. I acknowledge it's a long plan, frankly longer than I thought initially, but we kept trying to pull things out, and there's a lot of things that we think are important. So I'll talk about why I don't think it's a problem that it's a bit longer and how I envision or talking with committee and member and staff here, how I see this ultimately implemented. So I want to set that up. But if you're good with that, I will bring it up on the screen so we can all see the same. And I might not be taking feverish notes as we go through, but Clark is doing that. So be assured everything you're saying is being heard. And I will do my best to answer the question, but Clark and Elaine will be jumping in as well as we go through. So let's see.
We especially want to thank the, for the letter, the climate, committee letter. That was great.
It's very well written.
It is, I'm sure it says something really cool.
That was actually quite entertaining.
Get up to that. But we'll just start with the screen. Obviously you saw the branding from previous iterations. So the branding that we used early on for the process puts it into the plan here. We'll change that to 2026. But we did think it was important, and this was Shayna's suggestion, and I felt very strongly that it was a great suggestion, is that this committee is so embedded in all of this work, that right up in the front should be a letter from the Climate Action Committee, although it should be Energy Climate Action Committee. I'm editing as we go here. We'll get the name right. We didn't want to put words in your mouth, so you can see this is just Latin gibberish for formatting at this point. But if you're able to come together over the next few weeks and draft a letter that kind of explains what would you like to explain about this, we'd love to put that in. That way, when someone's reading the report, they start with that. They get the grounding of all the work that the committee's done and what us. I'll give you a hard word count because we want to make sure it sticks on one page for readability. So I'll send over that hard word count after. But thought it would be helpful for you guys to see the whole document and then be able to write the letter with the context of the document and everything you've done. So, way to set the context. Any questions on that piece of it?
It would be good if we could get it to you before it goes out to the public. So we're talking 2 weeks, right?
If that's reasonable, I'd love to do that next couple of weeks. And that's the only piece of the plan that we'll be sharing today that is missing. So everything else would be ready and would be the same version that would be going out for public comment. Certainly if we hear things today, we'll log that and make edits to it as we go. But for the most part, we're hoping this is the version that goes out for public comment with that letter, with a couple of little formatting things that we noticed just as we were coming into the meeting, because there's always something. So we'll tweak a little bit here and there, but for the most part, this is what you can see. So we also want to start early up with acknowledgements. There's a lot of people that we talked to and that contributed to the plan. If there is anyone that's missing that you're aware of through conversations, please let us know. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible, but certainly not the same one.
One item that I was thinking of is the natural seashore. They may or may not want to be listed on here, but
Did we not list them?
No, we didn't.
We did not list them on purpose.
yeah, that's I figured that. Double check.
There are conversations going on.
Go with them, but they don't want to.
Yeah, that's understandable. Okay.
But maybe just to tease out that point a bit further, they are listed in a number of places as actors because they do work in these
Okay,
spaces.
good.
So we didn't extricate them from the plan because they're an important component of the community and the plan. They're just not the place for them.
Exactly.
We also have a meeting with them at the end of January to go through the document where they're tagged to make sure they're comfortable with.
Oh, great.
So they are very well.
Very good. It's a very impressive list, by the way.
Mike,
Yep, Mike.
Two hands.
Yeah, thank you. Any reason why we didn't mention the tech school? Cape Cod Regional Technical High School, which we have several Eastham residents that go to the school.
We were attempting to highlight everyone we had direct conversations or directly contributed to this plan. So that could be why. I don't know that had specific conversations.
No, we didn't meet with the tech school, for the student focus groups. We did that with the high school, but I'd be happy to set up a meeting with the tech school to make them familiar with the document. I don't know if we list them as formal partners unless they had a lot to contribute during the public comment period, maybe.
Again, we have two Eastham representatives on the school committee. We have several students, and they're also active in solar and electric buses. So,
And they are listed as actors under a few of the
I think,
strategies.
yeah.
I'll check which ones, but they are listed in terms of implementation. But we can talk about if that makes sense.
I'm happy to set up a meeting with them and share the document when it's public and see if they have more to contribute.
thank you.
Yeah, so Mike, maybe can you send me the names at the tech school you'd like
Yeah, that'd be
Us to
great.
meet with?
Robert Sanborn's superintendent. He should be the focal point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be my friend.
And maybe you can do it in the introduction. I don't know if you know.
You know Bob.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's great.
Thank you.
Actually, what might be more helpful is the names of, I think you said people on the school committee who are involved from Eastham to the school committee, so that might be more helpful.
Well, that's easy. That's my,
That's-
I guess, I mean,
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Intersecting circles. Thank you for that comment. Appreciate that.
And
So,
and there's also CVEC too. I don't know whether you want to include them or not.
hmm,
Because
Okay.
they're the ones that operate our landfill solar site as well as our elementary school solar site, the DPW solar site. And I'm on the board of directors representing Eastham for CVEC as well, so.
but Mike, did CVAC meet with the commission during the creation of the plan and have inputs? I think that's what the acknowledgement page is designed to do, right? Acknowledge those people that were part of that process. Unfortunately, it sounds like we didn't catch that early when they went through the list of groups with us back in the spring. We didn't catch that as being missing.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the outreach as to who we were. I thought that
No,
was,
during like the March meetings where they went over who they were gonna be talking to, we had recommendations back to them on groups to
Okay.
include.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that, sorry.
fine. And I'll also say that reflecting back on intersecting circles, to the extent that anyone on those sort of groups or committees brought that information to the process, that was helpful too, so.
But maybe get them in the actors page, because there's certainly folks that could work with us moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you're listed as stakeholders for different recommendations, so it could actually also be helpful for whoever's like liaising with them to share the plan and see if they have input. That could be kind of the feedback loop with them too. And I think we probably would also be happy to sit in on a conversation if that was necessary.
Thank you for those thoughts. So jumping back into the document, so here's the table of contents. I'll walk through each of the sections so we can pause on them, but just wanted to give you an overall sense of flow. I'll talk a little bit about the reader's guide, and then you'll see the next couple of chapters, introduction, planning, context, community engagement, kind of describing how we learned about all that information, how we gathered all the information through the public process, what are the other previous efforts that fed into it, and then the key findings is a way of summarizing everything we've collectively heard, both through the public and community outreach, through some of the scanning the prior documents, and then through just a general review of state of best practices. So we did a review of other climate action plans and other plans that intersect it. So that's all summarized in key findings. The key findings really sets the stage on how recommendations were developed. So I'm sure you're all probably most interested in the recommendations, but all those other pieces talk about how you get there. We'll go through the recommendations, which is the bulk of the report, and then want to focus on implementation. That's where we're envisioning the tools to be able to prioritize the recommendations. I'm going to measure success, how to measure the implementation and the success on those different recommendations, and then some appendices that I'll cover as we get to the end of that as well. I will say there was more content than we could jam into the report. Some of that made its way into their appendices, such as the communication guide, and we'll talk about that a bit. But certainly there's more content. I will say there are a few more things that we actually thought were good content, but just didn't fit into the report. So we're just going to share some resources for the committee if you guys are interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't fit in the report, but thought they were good things to pass along. With that, I'll jump through each section and feel free to pause as we go through. So the reader's guide, we heard from this committee in many of the meetings that we wanted something early on that's kind of spoke to the individual, that talked about the different things that an individual, a community, and different associations could do. So we styled that into the reader's guide. It includes an about the plan, which is kind of like the executive summary, but we thought this was a bit more approachable. And as you get into the reader's guide, it kind of orients the readers to some of the major concepts that will be in the plan, including mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. To kind of give you an overview of what those things mean. And then how to use the plan. This is where you kind of orient what the different chapters are within the plan described in there. So it functions like an executive summary, but as the keynote is a less wordy version, so that's helpful. And then the part that we really know was focused here, how can I act? So you'll see here on this page, there's collective actions, and each of these is leads you directly to the place in the plan where it talks about that action. So if someone is interested in youth and climate action projects, you click on that link to that recommendation, and it'll bring you straight to that page. So if someone's interested, they know how to dig in a bit more deeply. This first page is collective actions. The next page is individual actions. I like the suggestion from the committee earlier on about including these up front. I think this is a feature that a lot of other climate action plans don't prioritize enough. So hopefully this is a helpful list. You kind of organize topically here. And this again are things that any individual can do. So committee, the town will do great work, but hopefully this can also add individual actions here.
By the way, I think we'd love to see the ECAC included in that list of joint forces. Because as you know, we do have volunteers, our 7 members can't do all the work. So, we're very open to having folks join us.
And then we close out the reader's guide. Anything else that we should add about this section? The one thing I will say is that if someone's curious about this plan, you could even take this as a standalone, and here's the reader's guide, and it might be someone interested enough to read the plan itself. So it could be used in a couple different ways. That was the intent of the reader's guide. And then an introduction, that's kind of sets the context. I'll say in something like the regional climate action plan, this section is much longer. We were trying to trim these early sections as much to get to the recommendations, but what we really focused on is making it as Eastham specific as possible. So where there's Eastham information, Eastham data is referenced. We get some highlights here. Shanna's suggestion to really emphasize some of the Eastham things in this section. I appreciate that. So on the bottom left, it talks about some of the specific statistics that are relevant to Eastham in terms of resiliency. Goes on and talks a bit more about some other elements of the plan and some of the things that make Eastham threatened by some of the impacts of climate.
I want to ask you a question on page 11, again, just because this is kind of a frame, mindset framing question. In here, let me see if I can find it. You mentioned that in that top paragraph at the bottom, primary contributors from on-road vehicles. And you also say before that, primary contributor for that, for energy use in the home is oil. What's that?
Yeah, I remember
First
reading
paragraph.
that somewhere.
Oh, yeah, no, there it is, yeah.
The last sentence,
Residential use.
I caught that as well.
Yeah. And I think I know what you're trying to get at. Certainly the fuel oil is a bigger part of the overall fossil fuel, but I'm thinking, would it be appropriate to add natural gas in there? Because I think we're really trying to push both sets of fossil fuel.
But it also includes propane, so I had caught that as well.
Oh, and
I was
propane,
thinking,
yeah.
instead, residential use of fossil fuels for heating, period.
Yeah,
That might,
that.
yeah. So just something to think about there, again, just to set the stage, so as people go through this, and like, oh, good, I'm natural gas, so I don't have to worry. And then I'll read the rest of it.
Home heating systems or something.
We will take all those down and review them. There is more of a discussion of the GHG inventory a bit later.
Right.
But acknowledge the reference there, and we'll take a look at that section.
And also, when we get to the greenhouse gas inventory, I think that's another question down there. As we get into discussion of electricity, again, I'm just thinking from the standpoint of not having people stop as they're reading the introduction and say, oh, I'm confused, or I'm not going to read more. It seems like a little disclaimer there when you say that a good part of the greenhouse gas inventory is showing emissions from electricity. It seems like that needs another sentence. To say similar to how you did it for the I'm actually further ahead. I'm sorry, yeah, I just realized I jumped ahead on you. You mentioned for instance, as material at the landfill continues to break down, those emissions will reach zero in the future. Something like that for electricity. Because as we're talking about electricity here on the left, people are going to be like, you're telling me I need to electrify, but I see a lot of our emissions are from electricity. What gives? And I know it's a sticky question. You folks are really good at I think wording things in here just needs a sentence in there on that. Calm people's fears.
Can you take a look at that? Maybe back to where we were, there are two hands up over there.
Yeah.
Hello again. Can you go back to the previous page, Steve?
The one that was just on the screen?
The graphic before this. No.
Oh, you mean actually that, gotcha, that one.
No, that one there. So local climate change impacts. We don't say anything about health and air quality. Do we think that's less of an issue than severe storms or droughts and wildfires? Or, I mean, does that not need to be at that level, or is that a little too much of a level? Should it be just a level below? We certainly know it impacts people's health, and we certainly know we have air quality issues as the temperature increases, as well as emissions.
Think about that. Yeah, and we'll take a look and go back and take a look at that. I think the intent here was direct versus indirect, but some of these are on the line, so yeah, we can take a look at that.
Well, I believe those are direct impacts of
Yeah.
climate change. So locally,
Yeah,
I mean, we worry about people working outside. We worry about elderly and not having air conditioning. So I mean, there's a bunch of things that I think that are health related as well as the air quality. So
yeah, probably came out as a consistent
I
concern.
was just gonna say, we referenced those exact things that you just said, other areas in the plan, especially in the recommendation, so I think it would actually be a good addition. And maybe just for like, all about aesthetics, I think about two other impacts, so it's like a 9.
That's what
So
you
it looks like there's a little bit of room that we can play around with there, but we,
We had to find two things.
yeah, two more things, so we can break that up a little bit into air quality and other pollutants, water, I don't know, if it's water quality there, things like that, yeah.
Thank you for that. One other thing we wanted to definitely include in the introduction was the climate emergency declaration, so just pull that separately. Have that reference directly in there and a very brief section on why you develop a local climate action plan to kind of explain what the plan was. Much there. One thing we did want to make sure to do is reference all of the previous activities that have happened and put it on a timeline. It looks quite impressive, actually.
Yeah.
So this includes both formal things like formal plans that have been adopted, as well as just efforts or major initiatives in town. We didn't go into detail to explain what each one of these was. It'd be many pages, but hopefully that makes the point that this isn't the starting point. This is along the progression of action. We talked about this one briefly, but this is just a brief summary of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We'll take a look at the facts based on the suggestions there. We do include the greenhouse gas inventory in its entirety as an appendix. So if someone's interested in know who these committee members are, then they can dig into it. But it's just a high level. And then one thing we wanted to include was something that was very Eastham specific. So this is setting the context for Eastham specifically, so a bunch of demographic characteristics. And this helps set the context for some of the latter discussions where we talk about the aging population, where we talk about how this interacts with the housing situation in Eastham. So this kind of sets some of the facts and some of the relevant parameters in the town of Eastham.
Questions?
Okay.
There's some pretty impactful statements in here about vulnerability. I would think it's somebody who maybe is not that familiar with some of that language about flood zones and so on. I don't know if there could be somewhere like a link where they could get more information on that, because if you don't know, it's puzzling to say that 26% of Eastham is within the flood zone. So I don't know. Somebody might be really puzzled and concerned about that and not really understanding it. So I don't know.
But has a mitigation plan maybe provide that?
I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking links
Would be
and
something we could, yeah.
Think about that. I know there is more discussion in the Cape Cod Climate Action Plan of what that means. That'd be one resource, but it seems like there should be some local resources that are relevant as well. Similar to the housing situation.
Yeah, I just thought like to, I think maybe I mentioned it in the staff notes, like a listing of links. Because there's a lot of resources that are listed in the recommendations also, that just having like a listing of some of the resources that are referenced might be helpful. On like one page, not extensive.
We could kind of do that chapter by chapter. I talked to our graphic designer about this actually last week because for the same reason you just brought up, like, should we be linking to the freshwater strategy? Should we be linking to the, like, whenever it's mentioned? And we actually came across that sort of idea where we could have a one pager that is just like a bunch of relevant links and it lives in the appendix. And it could be like, okay, your community demographics page, here are the links that informed it. Yeah.
Would there be something in the doc that, very simple, an asterisk, I don't know what, that would let you know that there is more information?
Yeah,
available?
or that could even live in the reader guide too, something that says like a lot of resources will be mentioned or referenced to this plan, they live in the appendix.
How do we, speaking of flood, I wasn't quite sure how to interpret the 27% is in the special flood area, but 80 to 90% is flood risk is majority of town. What's the difference between those two?
Well, that would be like they're currently in the flood zone. And then there's like, they're doing modeling for 2030, 2050, like, and those properties are at risk of getting more inundation. They may not be in the flood zone right now, according to the flood maps, but they are.
So flood risk
They're in
is
a-
different than, so there's more in the flood risk area than there is in the special flood
One is
hazard area.
official, that's been designated by the government, right?
I just like to be able to explain when people
Yeah.
ask the question, because it was interesting.
80 to 90% is
Well,
Back
the
in the
town,
day, like, oh my
you
God.
know?
let me talk to the experts to make sure to give you the right answer, but I'm fairly confident that this is percentile, so that's comparing it against peer locations, not a proportion of the town.
Oh.
So you are the most at risk compared to other areas.
Okay,
So I think percentile usually means we're not confident.
so maybe that should just be Eastham in general, you know. Eastham is in the 80 to 90 percentile for flood risk amongst Barnstable or US towns or something like that,
Yeah, I think it might be Massachusetts.
or Massachusetts. Yeah, that'd be great. We could set the context for
Yeah.
that state.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Maybe some other hands before I go to the next page, I'm gonna just take them.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, Kathy. Kathy,
I'm concerned about the way that the housing units have been described as seasonal. I think it needs to say part-time, right? Seasonal implies people come for 6 weeks in the summer and then they go home. Right? It's a huge issue for part-time residents in Eastham. So I would ask you to change that seasonal to part-time. Right? Because there are many part-time owners who are there all year round. It's just not their full-time their primary residence. I mean, that's the way to really think about it. It's not a seasonal issue. It is and it isn't.
is there a legal, governmental, regulatory terminology of seasonal?
Seasonal is just a really pejorative term.
If you know what's in the other town reports, very split this. I mean, seasonal is typically the term that the state uses, and certainly I don't want to put anything in here that has a bad context here. I'm just curious how it's referenced in other plans, so we can definitely take a look at that term.
Kathy, would it make sense, and I don't know that it, again, depending on the outcome of what you're looking at, to say seasonal and part-time?
No, it should say full-time and part-time. Those are appropriate designations.
Yeah, but there's, again, the legal framework, you know, we're a seasonal community officially, there's all sorts of stuff that I don't understand that's out there that.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to get into a debate on that.
Yeah,
This is not the forum. This is not the forum for that.
yeah, all right, thanks.
Thank you for flagging that concern.
Mike,
Yeah, regarding climate impact vulnerabilities, I mean, while not on here, and I'm not sure how we get this, it would be good to know how many people in town are at a health risk if we lose power for a prolonged period of time in, say, the winter, for example?
Everyone.
How many people are homebound and rely on medical equipment, which may have inadequate backup should we have a prolonged and major winter storm? I'm just wondering,
Sounds like an action for us to go try to.
yeah, I'm thinking that because that's important. That's important to know.
I know, but I don't even think we have a list of homebound seniors. We have a partial list of the COA.
Because I'm thinking in terms of emergency rescue, we should know who those
Yeah.
folks are.
I'll take a note there to see if we can find some data like that.
I will mention that, Lisa and the PD both, I think, have a list that they reach out to ahead of major storms. So that, and COA, yeah. So there is a list that they do reach out to folks ahead of major storms that is there. I don't know
Okay,
how
great, yeah,
comprehensive it is though.
okay.
There might be another, if we can't get that and feel confident about it, there could be something else that links to social vulnerability, that we can get like a data set.
Okay.
So while you're having that conversation, we can talk to our data guy too and see.
Okay.
Thanks. So that's the context setting from the context. We did want to summarize all of the community engagement and probably a good time to thank everyone who supported that over the process. I'll go through this section fairly quickly. If there's anything that committee members want to give in terms of feedback, certainly take it after the meeting. I did want to highlight that this just summarizes all of the major inputs to the plan so that anyone reading this will realize that this isn't a document coming from a vacuum. Highlights all the different activities. I'm going through a lot of work in a very short time, so apologies for that, but I wanted to highlight all those different ways that we engaged with the public. These are some of the things that people might not be as familiar with, like the direct work with the middle school, and some of the presentations we did in local community groups or advertised publicly, but different ways to engage with the public. I jumped to that really quickly. Blaine, is there anything that I should have covered more?
That's a great crowds.
Yeah. We need a green crab emoji somewhere.
Key findings, this is a bit more dense in terms of text, but we thought it was important to be able to describe in a little more detail what we heard and how that lands at the recommendations. Before I go into that topically, I did want to pause at guiding values. This was a discussion we had in the community workshop, and we came out with kind of 3 themes here that didn't neatly fit into any of the different sectors that we'll talk about later, but we're really cross-sector. So you'll see the themes of equity, resilient community, and partnerships and regionalizations show up throughout the recommendations. So guiding values that we pulled up. And then for each section here, you'll see an introduction and then a summary of the major themes that we heard from this community outreach. So probably not one to dive into tonight, but this was attempting to try to capture the major themes we heard. It doesn't cover everything we heard. We didn't want to just say everything we heard, but these are the major findings that bubbled up. So again, you'll see that each of the topics, everything from what do we start with? Buildings, energy, transportation, natural resources, communities. So again, a good amount of content there, but really sets the stage for getting to the recommendations. So then, of course, the bulk of the report is the recommendations, and this feels like the things that committee members will want to dig into and give us great feedback after you have a chance to dig into it. I at least want to orient you to what each one looks like for now. So this top page just has all of the sectors and goals summarized. And then for each of the sectors, it begins with a page that summarizes the goals and the strategies within that section, within that sector. And then for each strategy, you'll see information including on the top left of that box is a summary of what that strategy is. Bottom left is the specific actions to be taken in order to achieve that strategy. And then you have the categories of factors, a little bit of discussion of equity and code benefits, which something might have a benefit beyond climate, how to measure that strategy implementation, funding that's available, and a type of action to help to categorize. So this is a lot of information here. But I will say, as I know some people on this committee really like spreadsheets, so we'll give you a spreadsheet version of this as well. So you can dig into it that way, but this was our attempt to format it in a way that someone could read it and whatever they're most interested in, they could dig into a lot more detail. If it's okay with you, I'd like to jump to the other sections before we get into it. Okay. So again, this is the bulk of it. You'll see it organized by strategy, by sector. But one thing we know is important is thinking about how these recommendations are implemented. So there's a specific implementation section. On this page, it really describes the different pathways for implementation. So we did review this with town staff, but let's take a look at this. I think it's important to highlight that not every recommendation flows through the same process. There's certain things that need to be prioritized through the strategic planning process, and there's a town process for that. There's other things that it's not even the town that leads to move forward. So just had described that this isn't kind of one step along a linear path. There's many different ways towards action. That in a few more words. But what it also does in the implementation section, we put together a matrix to help those who would like to prioritize activities. So this page describes what the matrix entails. It's has a way of describing how we rank different things. We would love to get numeric on every one of these things, but it's not possible. So we did our best job to kind of categorically rank them. So for each of the sectors, you'll see a table that has all the strategies, and it has a number of different characteristics of that strategies. So if there was a committee that really wanted to prioritize on greenhouse gas emissions benefits, they could take a look at that. Want to prioritize the ones that give you the biggest bang for the buck, that sort of information is here. And again, we'll provide this in a spreadsheet. So if you really just want to sort and look at the things that an individual cares about, then they can sort there. But I did want to describe a couple of these in a little more detail. So we know municipal cost, and on the flip side, savings to the municipality are important. So those are the first two categories there. But there's things that don't cost anything or cost a very little amount of money. So that's described up to higher cost items. And then it describes the ones that will have a bigger financial benefit to the town as well. So depending on what you're using this for, that is there. Ease of implementation. Some people like to go for low-hanging fruit, so you can kind of describe what those are. But also gives you the sense of the ones that take a little bit more effort. And then on the ones on the right here, those are different types of benefits from the strategy, and more is better for all of them. So if you see more icons, that means more community financial benefits. That means like the resident taxpayer may be saving money. So you might see one that's going to cost the town some money, but ultimately an individual is going to save money. So it's a way to balance the financial side of it. Health, economic benefits, environmental benefits. Those are environmental benefits outside of greenhouse gas emission benefits. Those are added in there. And then resiliency and adaptation. And you'll see some of the sectors are a little bit different, where you'll see more on the resiliency adaptation side, for example. There's a little bit more on the energy side when we talk about energy resilience. Something like natural resources, we see a lot of icons for environmental benefit there. And so we have those for certain sectors rated like that. We'll give you a spreadsheet for all of those, so you can compare them.
Great, this will be very helpful. This is a nice way to lay this out. So just for the future, just curious, are there attempts at not sort of quantifying behind the scenes here that we can access just as a starting point? I know you don't want to publish that, it's not appropriate here to do that, but.
I will say for some of these, certainly there is the ability to do them quantitatively. We have done for some of them. Some of them it's too early, so it's like initiate
Sure.
program.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest is, as any town works on narrowing down the list, then it's the right time to start getting a little more quantitative and looking at them. So please don't ask me to do that for all of them, because I know
I
you
agree.
can.
No, we got
But if you have a subset that you're really interested in, we're happy to talk about what is available in terms of the ability to quantify this.
I'm just thinking if you've made a start at some of these, that gives us a partial start as we get rolling. So,
The short answer is no. I don't have a spreadsheet
Okay.
that has all the
Okay.
numbers.
All right.
I can
That's-
say we're close.
okay, that's fine.
I see a couple hands. I'm happy to pause in this section if you want. There's some hands up.
Mike,
Yeah, Steve, what are the parenthetical comments in the municipal cost and savings columns?
Thank you for that. So I think I can zoom in here to make sure we do that one. Maybe I can. So this is the phenomenon of some things are inexpensive to start or explore, but expensive once you get into them. So for example, here, and Clark may fill in some details when we get into it, but something like a community solar effort. That came up frequently during the public meetings. It's relatively low cost to like investigate. So the first couple actions are investigate and explore. So that's low cost. So you might be able to get into that. But then if you're actually to implement something, then that's in the parentheses, that higher level. If you were to ultimately deliver on a municipal microgrid, that's going to be expensive. But we didn't want to discourage exploration, which is low cost. So that's kind of the exploration versus implementation. That's what the asterisk describes at the bottom there.
Okay, it was just confusing, like something goes from non-applicable to moderate or non-applicable to high. And
Yeah, let's get one of those. We can describe that example for you.
Yeah, looks like energy 1.1 has that.
1.1. You want to describe that 1.1 then?
Sure, so basically, to investigate doing the time of use studies is a low cost. If it's not completed, there's no savings, but if it's completed, it's gonna be really high savings relative to that cost. So that's how we had to sort of frame it, is if it's implemented, then there's large savings. But if the study doesn't move forward and create any tangible result, there's no applicable savings to the town. So we didn't want to misrepresent potential savings, because they might look at it and say, oh, there's high savings no matter what if you do this, but that's not the whole story. Is that a good way to explain it? Like, if it's not implemented, and that's why there's two tiers. So like another good example, you zoom in a little, sorry. The third E2.3 is another one where there's.
Okay, I understand that. Could we just add a note then under the graphic like you do for the asterisk of what the parent, what that means then?
I think we attempted to.
Why can't you say, parentheses
I don't understand it.
Yeah, maybe we need to reword the.
Yeah.
It's
Maybe
hard to
we need
understand.
to make that a little bit less small and bright.
Well, if you're asking questions, then many people are going to ask questions. So we'll take a look at the language on that footnote.
Okay, thanks. I know you got values in parentheses reflect, but again, they aren't really values. They're just assessments, right? So
I think there was a note in the text also, so.
There is a note, it's on the next page, I think, where we introduce it.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for flagging that. We'll take a look at that language to make it a little more clear. So that's the idea of the implementation metric. The last thing second to last thing, wanted to highlight was measuring success. So as you go through the recommendations, there is a discussion of how to measure each of the recommendations. We thought it would also be helpful to put it together into one place to say, if you're going to prioritize measuring some things, here are some of the key things that you would want to measure. So on the left-hand side, we do want to be clear that we know that the top line measurement of community greenhouse gas emissions is like gold standard in terms of mitigation. You want to get that number down, but that one takes a lot of effort to measure, as we've collectively done to measure, and it takes a little bit of a lag to see the success. So on the right-hand side are more practical metrics, measures that you can track over time. I will say this is quite a list here. There are many of these that we are going to be tracking regionally and putting into a viewer. So you won't be alone if you're starting to track some of these. Many of them we will be able to report on the municipal level. So when we get towards that effort, happy to talk more about that. But that's the intention here. Here's our things to measure progress overall.
Mike?
yeah, sorry. What I'm not sure if this is the forum, but what I'm concerned with is that in the transportation sector, being the highest, certainly, certainly up there in terms of contribution to greenhouse gas, we really don't know how much of an impact we would have on that number if we did everything we wanted to do in the town of Eastham, but nothing to those transiting the town of Eastham. That's my concern is, again, we're looking at that high target, that high contributor, but we don't know how much of this is from folks that live in Eastham or visit Eastham versus those going from Orleans to Wellfleet, just passing through. There's got to be a way we can get our hand on that.
I hear you, and I remember that comment that you shared before, and I share
Yeah.
your frustration with not having easily available data. Know that that's something we're trying to answer, not just for Eastham, but for the Cape and all the towns. So we are trying to get that answer, but it's frustratingly difficult to get any level of.
No, I understand. My concern is that if you look at it from this level, it says like, oh, we should be attacking transportation, 'cause that's one of the biggest things. And yet we attack transportation locally, but the payback isn't necessarily that 100% of that 42% contribution. You know what I mean? So.
Yep.
So in order to compare it to other things we need to do, we really need to get a handle on how much of it do we impact versus how much the people transiting impact. So I have to think about that more too myself.
Let's have a follow-up on that one, because I am curious as well.
If I understand your question, Mike, does the town or anyone have count meters? They're doing a vehicle count seasonally so they can compare, the traffic that's going back and forth on 6 off
Right.
season versus during the summer, and then you say, okay, well, actually 60% of the vehicle counts or what have you come from whatever source, and then therefore most of our effort should be targeted at that source. Yeah, I think I would guess that most of the vehicular traffic comes from like 3 or 4 months out of the year. That's not to say we should be think about residents for local traffic, but so it seems like someone should be doing vehicle counts 6.
Yeah, we are, and we know that we have 40,000 vehicles transit the town of Eastham in a given day during the summer months.
Is
And
that
we know we-
two-way
and we know-
line?
In the
Is
summer
that
months,
two-way?
and we don't
Is that
have
two-
40,000 vehicles in the town of Eastham, right? So
Mhm. Well, anyway, I think the weeds later, but
Yeah, so.
I concur.
So an
but-
option that we need to
Right.
look at.
Mhm.
Let me say, I think it's really important to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze.
Mhm.
And if that's a really hard, I mean, we want to lower greenhouse gases and the amount of traffic. We can find out the amount of traffic. What are the percentage of vehicles that are electric vehicles or, we don't, I'm not sure that's something we should chase, to be honest with you. And, we might disagree, Mike, on that, but I feel like electrification of automobiles is something we should pay attention to and go for.
And can measure.
It's gonna happen anyway, where it's, if there's more electrical vehicles on the road, now than there were 5 years ago, and there will be more in 5 years. So we quantify it. Do we know the actual driver that we've helped make that happen? I think it's just a whole movement that is gonna happen, and counting pennies on this is probably not a good use of human resources and effort, in my view. That's all. Whatever.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a good point. It's probably more than pennies, but I would address it slightly differently from my own perspective. Let's address things that we can control, we can impact. I'd sure like to see more visitors that stay in Eastham bring their EVs, and that we can count based on perhaps how many visitors are coming and with EVs and staying here overnight. And we can impact that by encouraging the adoption of EV chargers, for instance.
That's
So whether, we're not impacting how Wellfleet is putting in EV chargers and how their people are developing. So that's difficult for us to.
Yeah,
impact
that's what
at
I'm
all.
saying, like, we
Yeah.
really wanna chase it down. We're gonna see benefits here no matter what. So, okay,
again, my point was from a climate action plan, we have limited resources to prioritize what we need to do. And if we put a lot of resources into transportation, we're not affecting that full, what I'm saying is we're not affecting that full 42%, whatever it is, impact to greenhouse gas. We may only be affecting 20%.
We could do, we could probably, let's talk about this later. I think we could probably we could break down the 42% into the addressable 42% versus the non-addressable. So I have some ideas
Yes,
on that. But
that's
let's
what
talk
we need to
about that. Yeah, let's
Thank you.
talk about that.
And certainly thank you for all this discussion, and I do stand by that most of these things will have benefit no matter what that specific number is. But we do want to help you come up with that number, not to break any news, but we just shared with staff this morning. We're setting up some regular traffic accounting equipment on Route 6 just north of Brackett Road to get some monthly factors, to
Okay.
get a bigger. It's actually related to planning for improvements to Route 6, but could inform this as well. And
Great.
I just got that email this morning, so it's all new to me, but
Is that just axle count or will you get types of vehicles?
primarily radar based, so we have length based measures, but it's not terribly reliable for classification. Follow-up conversation, we'll have more data on this front, but to did want to do a sense on data. Last thing I want to cover before we open it up to any and all questions, just what is included in the appendices. So greenhouse gas emissions inventory, that's just the memo that has all the details on it. We did include all of the presentations and summaries from the kickoffs and workshops, in case anyone is interested. We have an education and communications tool. I'm actually gonna pick the link to describe.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the more robust recommendations of the plan was around education and outreach, two separate recommendations actually. And there was just so much that we wanted to say and we heard from the community that wouldn't actually fit in the plan itself without the plan being ridiculously long. So we created a separate toolkit, which we've actually done for other town plans that we worked on in the past specific to communications, but we also added the education here because we felt like those two things went hand in hand. So yeah, it just starts off with an introduction and we break it into the two sections. Well, we kind of start with just a little bit of how to use the document and some context for the reader in case they're using it as standalone, without really looking at the plan itself. Yeah, so you can keep going. It's just that language will probably be a bit repetitive from the plan itself. But then when you get to the education toolkit, we talk a little bit about, Jesus, I can see as my eyesight is bad to have contacts in. So yeah, the start with background, but then we talk about the specific topics we heard about from community members. So I think we got like, what was it? A couple hundred education specific
Oh, yeah.
things from the community, like topics that they wanted to hear about. So we broke all those comments out and pulled out the topics that people want to learn about, and that's what those bullet points are. So that could be a really cool if you're looking to do some educational programming as a committee, like, you know, what are the gaps right now? What do people want to learn about? It's there. And then we talked a little bit about like how you could do the programs and formatting. Much of this is also based on what community members suggested to us, but some of it is also best practice or creative ideas that we had as a team. So that's the education side of things, some partners to consider working with and how you can center equity in that work. And then the communications toolkit is our communications manager, Sarah Colvin, puts this together often to accompany town plans. And it's about both communicating how to use the plan as you implement it, but also communicating regularly about climate change and climate action. So just some tips throughout this section of the toolkit to consider for that. Probably good, Shana, to share with the town communications.
Yeah, definitely.
So. That's all.
That's what you added here, it does include lots of lists here of different resources that we use regularly, so those resources as well. And then the final appendix is not new content, but I know sometimes it's nice to have a cheat sheet of sorts, a handout. So this is just all of the sectors, goals, and strategies. So as you want to talk about priorities, this is just a one pager that one page or two sides that has all of those goals, strategies. So. Yeah.
Question, Steve, so, and perhaps, maybe I missed part of the plan or implication, but is there going to be, or is there like, short-term, medium-term, and maybe this is for the town to decide, and all these things that the town and the Department of Public Works, but this is something we're gonna do, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, and I think that's just related to a comment that some of these things are related as far as high impact, as far as greenhouse gas emissions, they're very long term. Some of these might be short term, but some are very long term. So is that for the town to decide that when the town signs off for all these things to do, is the town going to decide based on staff capacity? What, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year, or when does that happen, so people have a sense of what's going to be done when, or a general time frame for when some of these benefits would be kicking in?
Question, I don't know if Shannon wants to answer that. The one thing I can say that's similar in the matrix is ease of implementation. Anything that's an easy thing that could be done on a shorter time frame, anything that's medium or high takes a longer period of time to get it going, but that doesn't commit the town to saying this is going to happen in that period. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's the two things, that there's no timeline and there's no prioritization. It's just sort of, those are the two things I think that the plan doesn't cover. It's not like a 5 year, 7 year, 10 year plan. It's kind of, this is what the community and all of the stakeholders have said is of importance to put as, you know, for the town to focus on for climate action. And I think after the plan is adopted, we can look at what are the most important things, what can we take to the strategic planning committee as like the top priorities, and vet those few items and then kind of go from there on the other aspects of implementation.
I would add that there's already conversation with the strategic planning committee about how the climate plan can be funneled up to the strategic plan every year. Because I know the strategic planning committee is trying to find a process for reviewing every single year how we are doing with the strategic plan. And we would do the same with the climate plan, interact with the strategic planning committee to funnel that stuff up so that it's front and center every year as to what the town is doing on these projects. So I think it's not in set in stone at this point, but I think that's kind of the concept.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I don't know, Shane, if you've seen the tool that they're using, I haven't seen details of it. But the strategic planning committee has evidently created some sort of a web-based tool, not public side, but on the town staff side. To help do that and help gather and track and prioritize. If that is a tool that fits for this type of approach, I think that might be wonderful to use. Unless there's some other tool that you all have seen and other best practices in other towns that if they're doing something like this, we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
So the best practice is what gets it through the local process. So I don't mean to be obtuse to the answer, but it is different. We're working with another town on the climate side that has their own spreadsheet and they track things on the spreadsheet and then they use that to help prioritize what they do. So there's different models. So it all depends what's most effective to feed into the town processes.
Just another, because there's a lot here and since it's a climate action plan that may be pulling out, maybe you already have, but where the rating, the greenhouse gas reduction, maybe pulling those out, consolidating those amongst the different sectors, and then people could see where they glance and more easily those strategies that are anticipated to have the biggest bang for the buck or the most impact on, you know, climate emissions reduction and benefit for addressing climate.
So you're saying a separate page
Right.
focuses on greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Right, with the three
Makes it very
segments.
clear which ones are the ones that are
Right.
probably more.
They're anticipated in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or is there like a way we could put it on the web and you could sort it maybe? I don't know how much work that is. So I feel like it could happen.
Well, each of these tables has greenhouse gases in them. Yeah, if that's, I know you all have done similar types of tables that are sortable.
Yeah.
That would be really
Climate action
cool.
tool.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, so I don't know, but that's everything.
Or unless the spreadsheet that you're mentioning already has that ability, we could adapt it so it would do that. That would get to what you're suggesting here, right?
Okay,
I'll work on that. So you have a hand. Do you want me to take down the screen? I don't know if you can see that or give a preference.
No, I'm okay. Cheryl, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is more general questions. This is going out, it's two-part but similar. One is it's going out for public comment. To who and how will they have access to it? I know, and then when the product's final, who's gonna get it and how are they gonna get it? I see that it's wicked long, so I don't assume print copies are gonna be available, but you know, being on the board of the senior center, you know, having to access a document like this on the computer for a certain population isn't really gonna work. And so I'm just wondering, actually, like, you know, I don't have a copy myself, but just seeing what I'm seeing, you know, how are you gonna get, who's getting it for comment, and then how are we gonna get it out to the community? I mean, one thought is if it's ready for town meeting, we could do little postcards or something. But again, that all requires people to have computer access. So that's it. That's all of my questions.
I'm happy to share what we do as best practice, but I don't know if the town has.
Yeah, and when we did previous plans, we left a copy at the library, but we can also print out a copy for the COA. And obviously, yeah, we did plan to post it on the town website and then send it to all the department heads again and ask them to share it with their respective boards and committees so that they're aware and they can get the word out there also.
That's a great idea. Have a reading copy available, maybe town hall, at the library, at COA. Yeah, it's a great idea.
That leads to another question relating to that. We are climate action people, right? Okay, so we read this document. The majority of the public is not going to read this. So the question is, how can we communicate this in a way that people understand? And I know you have a lot of experience with that. Do you have suggestions, techniques that we can use to
Roberta,
communicate this?
can I ask a follow-up question just to piggyback on that?
Sure.
Because I had a similar sort of notion, and I was wondering, Steve, first of all, congratulations, very, very good job by you and the team. A lot here. Did you consider actually having an executive summary level document, something of 2 or 3 pages in length, where you could really drive to the key stuff with a focus on findings and actions that could be taken, that would be inherently more accessible, particularly for community leaders and people who are going to have to make decisions based on the plan. I didn't see a conventional executive summary. I was wondering if you considered that or would consider it.
Couple of good questions. I can start, and others want to jump in as well. So maybe to round those. So the first, yes, the second chain is suggestion, library, COA, and town hall. We always standardly print paper copies at all those locations. In terms of making something that's different ways to present it, there's certainly a good amount of discussion of different ways to present it in the communications toolkit. But to be very specific, yes, we can help get a shorter version in a way that you can describe to different audiences. We would typically do that when we get to the phase where it goes to the select board. I don't know exactly what the format is, but whatever sort of presentation we give to them, obviously be a much tighter version and something that could be shared. In terms of the executive summary itself, we went back and forth on that with the executive summary and the reader's guide, and are open to different permutations, whatever the committee thinks would be helpful. The one thing I will say is we struggled a bit internally to put one together without. It's a challenge. It's always a challenge to put together an executive summary. The one thing we didn't want to do is highlight specific recommendations to the detriment of excluding other recommendations to imply a priority. So my short answer is yes, we can do it, but just want to caution you, it's tough to do without saying, and here's the few that we think are really important, because we didn't want to be the ones to make that call, but we can work with you to have something that's a shorter version to summarize.
I think in terms of getting to the select board, an executive summary of sorts would be very useful. I think it's not necessarily rehashing and pointing out all the actions, but maybe saying they're in these categories. And the question that we'll get from the select board is, all right, what kind of commitment are we making by voting for this? What type of obligations does this place in the town? Does it place any burdens on residents, especially inappropriately on less well-off residents? Those sort of questions we'll certainly be getting to. And I think a key part of this is simply to state up front that this is guidance, right? Or the right word other than guidance, but this is a set of goals that we're suggesting the town should take and prioritize. It'll get meshed with the town's resources and normal planning process. Those words are all kind of in here in different places, but having those up front, I think I don't know what you think, Shana, it might help in terms of saying, here's what we're asking the town to do.
I was thinking that it just depends who your audience is. If you want the select board to know it's gonna help us apply for grants and it has these benefits and everything that you were mentioning, we could put it in a cover memo, which is usually what the select board reviews when there's gonna be, a meeting discussion that they're gonna vote on. So it kind of talks about, what they are voting on and what they are committing to and all of that. So maybe that's just a cover memo, or, it could be also in the plan itself.
I think there's still value to what John's saying in terms of some sort of either. I don't think that it belongs in the introduction, because the introduction is so nicely laid out. Maybe just sort of
What about as part of the letter from the committee, Tom?
That's
we-
what I was.
yeah, in that kind of a section, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the letter by the committee is helpful in kind of giving the whole, a little bit of the history and being able to thank people involved in this, you know, that's an important piece and it's a personal part. But then maybe we think about then following it with an executive summary that is just more paragraphs after the letter. And that might be even something that we as a committee
We can help with.
think about, what we can really think through, what are we trying to convey?
Yeah, yeah. And hopefully maybe just in 1 or 2, 3 pages.
Yeah, at the most, the very
Yeah.
most, yeah.
Preferably like one or two,
Right.
do some graphics.
So could I just make a comment? Because I'm sorry, the pages at the end are really helpful in terms of an executive summary. The one, the cheat sheet pages, those, yeah. Right, I mean, they really, with some introduction into the what and how, right, this was created. These are the things that, the plan has come up with. And, if you wanted to really point to the pages that talk about the relative impact, right, the one in the section on the recommendations, but I wouldn't even put that in it initially. I think you could point to it somewhere or put it on a link that somebody could click on if they wanted to. So I think 3 pages plus a couple charts is probably more than enough, right, for most people.
Yeah, I like your idea, Kathy. I mean, and maybe this is almost like a guided tour of what's in the document, and you can then from there zoom into exactly where your interests lie on that particular day, and
Right.
it's a great summary.
I think that would help. I know I missed the beginning because having some interesting problems with my laptop, but is there a time frame for the public comment? Is the time frame set for that?
So we don't have a formal time frame set. The plan is to send this out in a couple of weeks and then have a 30-day public comment period. So likely the entire month of February, but it will be 30 days.
So the reason I'm asking that question is because, as Tom knows, so I represent the communications for the part-time residents in this town. And we have a newsletter that's targeted at around the 15th of February. So, and we can put a link to all of this on our website whenever we choose to. So I would like to feel that it's comfortable when you have a final version that you're comfortable posting, that we can post on our website for public comment, because since 55% of the households are part-time residents. And secondly, we can also publish it in a newsletter, because we do have a newsletter for people who are not likely to go to the website, but some of them actually get it in the snail mail. So we can kind of try to cover the landscape for about 1,100 part-time resident taxpayer in the town. That's a pretty significant, percentage of the people who own property in Eastham. So if you're comfortable with that, that would be our plan to go forward. And Tom, I'd be happy to work with you a little bit on the executive summary, if desired.
Well, yeah, thanks. I think let's chat afterwards to see if there's anything we can do to help you on that, or if you have ideas on what might be appropriate there.
Yeah, short answer is yes. Happy to coordinate on that and appreciate your help in getting the word out to that group.
But it needs to be written at 5th grade level.
That's
not it.
That's actually legit.
Yeah.
Understood.
I have a question on the implementation section, and I know, Shana, we haven't had a chance to sit down and have a more detailed discussion on it. So maybe this is about all we can do for now, but it almost seems like in this write-up, it's a little bit more decentralized than I would like to see it. I don't know about the rest of the committee. It almost seems like it needs to, I would love to see it say something like, there's going to be a staff lead in here. Now, maybe that may or may not be the sustainability coordinator that's in the action. But this one just kind of says, well, everyone's kind of doing something, at least the way I read it. And Shane, I don't know what you think, but it does seem like someone on the town staff needs to be at least the coordinator on the town side for this.
Coordinator, yeah, maybe not the lead of the, because, you know.
That's fine.
Yeah, a lot of the recommendations, it's clearly belongs to that department, but yeah.
And that coordinator could be you,
Just like
some
liaison,
planning,
like,
could
hey,
be-
how's it going? I hear you're working on composting. Can you give us an update? There's a recommendation in the plan, you know, can we meet? Can we see where you're at with that recommendation, depending on whatever it is that is being focused on at that time.
I mean, would you be comfortable with having some, you know, a sentence in here?
But
Or so.
Ideally, for effective implementation or
Yeah.
successful implementation of the plan, it be led by somebody in the town coordinate implementation of the
Yeah, yeah.
action items.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, cause I, two sides of it, I agree, the more that one person can track things, the better. But we didn't want to preclude the opportunity for things to move forward that are outside of that. So
Some
if
of
the town is doing, if the school is doing something, that wouldn't necessarily flow to that
Oh, I see.
person. Or there's some local organizations that could be doing action, so didn't want to preclude that, but also, yes, I hear you.
Yeah, and also it's good to have someone who's like tracking that stuff that's happening outside of the town too, so we know, because you know, there are community actions here. But to be able to track your progress into the future, you want someone that kind of knows, oh, what the school did do that, they did implement that curriculum, we need to loop that back into the climate action plan if you do a 2.0 in the future or whatever it is.
And agree, we don't want to stop initiatives, but we also don't want to create cross-purpose initiatives that someone might be trying to do something and someone else is trying to either duplicate it or do something that's a different approach that.
Yeah, you
That
want to
is like orthogonal
communicate
to the-
between actors who could be working
Yeah.
on something similar, but they're not too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See, that's the question about the actors. So are these potential actors? Or are these people who have agencies and people who said, yes, we will actively participate? They've made a commitment for implementation, or these are potential partners, maybe?
These are entities in a position to execute on the strategy.
Right, so they would have to be approached and agree.
They have already.
Oh, all of these have,
Well,
Oh,
with the
but not
staff,
the actors.
correct? The staff has reviewed
We've-
this and they've been
The
allowed there.
DPW and the Health and Conservation Department and Housing and Planning. So I met with Paul and Rachel and the housing coordinator. So we went through all of the action items that list them as
Uh-huh.
actors.
right,
And so they're aware of them.
okay.
And they're aware that these are action items that the community and all the stakeholders brought forward as.
Right, I do appreciate the town would, but like the Mass Clean Energy Center, Cape Light Compact, Mass Clean Energy Center. I'm just wondering if, so maybe potential actors and then funding, those are potential sources of funding, right? There aren't no funds committed for this, so.
Now, there may be on some specific. actions,
Right,
but
right.
that does not imply that there's specific.
So a quick time check, we have about 10 minutes towards our targeted wrap up time. If some of the specific comments are already on the table, I'd like to ask Steve, what sort of help can we provide as we go through, I guess there's a 2-week period prior to the roughly prior to the public release, and then there's the public comment period. What can we help in each of those periods? What kind of comments and reviews are you looking for? We obviously shouldn't be doing structural changes because this is a very intricate document and otherwise it'll never be published.
Yes. Complete is better than perfect. We'll go for complete. So first task in the next few weeks, the letter. That's the one piece we can't move forward without. So appreciate committee's attention on that. Beyond that, we've heard some things today. We're going to take back and take a look at chat with Shannon about. So there may be some minor tweaks. But beyond that, we would not endeavor to really make any significant changes to this document before it goes out, simply so that it can go out. As much as I heard great feedback today, I didn't hear anything that felt so critical that it shouldn't get that public airing.
Great.
So if you can give me a little bit of leeway and acknowledge that some of these things might be worked in as we get to the final, and we want to hear from all of the members of the public. These are some of these things we'll take away, having our queue to work on, but not be necessarily reflected in that draft. There were some things tonight, to be clear, that I think we can make tweaks next week. But if you said something that didn't get reflected, that doesn't mean it was ignored. It just means we'll work it into that final draft. So I would say in the next 2 weeks, focus on this. If you see something that's egregiously wrong and it's gonna offend someone in the next 2 weeks, let me know so I don't put it out there. But for the most part, this will be what goes out for public comment. And throughout that period, you're welcome to give us additional feedback.
I'm still a little confused about the executive summary. Did we say we are going to have one and who is going to write it?
We typically, do we publish an executive summary usually after the plan goes through public comment period, Steve?
That is our typical process, is to have a full executive summary.
After the public comment.
Right. The thought being, if there's significant changes to the document, then that would be in the final executive summary. And at that point, if the select board has anything that they think is important to emphasize in that document, we can include it.
That's a good way to do it.
That's our typical process.
So we kind of, I know you said you wanted to give it a little slightly shortened version to the select board. So in a way that would be an executive summary or.
It sounds more like the letter is what the select board likes to.
Yeah, I can just put together a memo
Okay, got
that
it.
highlights and send it out to you all if you want to look at it before we finalize it.
And maybe that would include that appendice that has the recommendations or something like that. There could be some targeted resources we pull out, but it sounds like the memo is the way to convey the context of this to them.
In terms of, obviously, formatting is done extremely well. I mean, y'all did an extraordinary job of the content, and then it's so nicely formatted. Obviously, we don't want to be disrupting that too much because that would again send into a spiral. But I have a question, for instance, in wording of actions, if there's some tweaks, or even if there's a recommendation on how to beef up an action, and I'm thinking of some of these where it just said evaluate. I'd sure love to see, you guys could push back on it if it doesn't fit, but I'd sure love to see areas where we can say more than just we're evaluating. Maybe there's an extra couple of words or an extra bullet point that says, here's what we're doing with that evaluation, like, let's see, evaluate energy code implementation. Okay, but what are we doing with that? Evaluate town incentives and implementation support. If we think of some good, like, single bullet items to add to that, would that be fair game?
Say that would be fair game during the public comment period.
Okay. Yeah.
The reason I'm being specific about that is this was reviewed by town staff, and some of those languages are actually quite specific as what they were.
Oh, okay.
So I wouldn't want to change something basically, it was just different than the town staff, so. So the plan is to take all of that public feedback, then vet it with the town staff.
Fair.
Yes, send it,
Fair.
do it during public comment.
Okay. And of course, as you stated in the front, this is a living document, so, yeah, the complete is better than perfect.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I want to say, I was really impressed. I think, from, the meeting we had, was it in December, where we all assembled up next door and stickies and everything, to this, I feel like a tremendous amount of effort and thought was put into this to try to make this high quality document. And I think that really is very evident. I think my one comment, and it's not meant to inform the document further, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like it's certainly good enough. But I noticed that there are a lot of actors associated with each one of the, some of these things, 56 goals and all, or strategies, or whatever we call them. And there are a lot of actors, and it's going to require enormous coordination. And so I don't know what the thinking is around that. It feels like that's a problem to solve and not anything to put into this document, but something for us to consider, like, wow, there's 16 entities assigned, not really assigned, but to be considered for this particular strategy. And there are 56 strategies. So it feels like an enormously complex puzzle
for us to try to take action on. And I just wonder if there are ways of simplifying that. And it's not to you, this is a comment to anyone who's participating in the meeting.
In a way, we've addressed that through one of the action items, strategies of the community is that we want to really build up a process within the town through some kind of coordinator or manager of this whole process.
Right.
And so somebody owns it, not entirely, but there's a coordinate, the traffic cop, so to speak, on this. And I think that it has been addressed in the report.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the kind words. I know sometimes when you're in the middle of a workshop in the process, it's hard to vision what the output is going to be at the end. So thank you for that. Thank you for hitting on that challenge of coordination. We're feeling it at the regional level.
Sure.
It's not here. I'm on an EV coordinating council today with every acronym of every state entity, and it gets complicated when you go to do the good work. But hopefully this is a helpful step along the way. So.
I think that's a good committee conversation for you to have as well. Like once this is done, you know, think about the priorities and then get the strategic plan and then think about, okay, out of those priorities, here are the actors to move forward these strategies. Like, do we need liaisons in the committee in the meantime to work with these people? Does someone have to own a strategy and kind of track it in lieu of having a coordinator for the town or while you're waiting? So
More of an art,
yeah, our
navigating it.
Yeah.
I think that gives you something good to think about though, and I think that's exactly like what your next step would be.
Good ideas.
Another thought is, we are so lucky. Eastham is so lucky to have you do this for us. I mean, just skip. We would like to be able to, you know, we all communicate with people in other communities and we would like to be able to help them and share what we have learned here. So I wonder if you guys have thought a little bit more about how you plan to use the Eastham plan to help other towns and how we might help you to communicate that.
I thought about it. Maybe we need to come back for a second agenda item, but we will be tapping you as an example of a community that's got a lot of the pieces together. I mean, we appreciate coming in, but frankly, you got a lot going for you as a town, really strong committees, really strong town staff, and committees and staff talk to each other. There's a model here that I think other towns can learn from, and yes, we will be tapping you as we start thinking about how to share this across.
Very good. Well, you know, I'd like to also just add, you know, my thanks to your team. It's been wonderful working with you and I hope we'll continue that relationship. As I said, it felt, as you all dove into the details of writing the document, it almost felt like, wow, you know what happened? You know, we were really, you know, it was really enjoyable to be watching how you work and how you engage, and how you know, communicate with the town. It was awesome. So yeah, thank you. And thank you for such an amazing document, which we could have never even approached by ourselves. There's no way.
Thank you.
And as we think about getting into the detailed review in a couple of weeks, I'm going to suggest that we kind of divide and conquer amongst ourselves and maybe break it down into somebody who's looking at buildings, somebody who's looking at energy, somebody who's looking at natural resources, et cetera. So think about what sections you might want to do. I think that would make the review a heck of a lot easier, more coherent as we provide comments back that are, you know, that are not at odds with each other, and bubble those up.
How would you suggest that we organize that?
So I would suggest that someone volunteer for each of those mini sections. And I can send out a list of what I'm thinking there. And then that person review it and come to the, you know, at a committee meeting, discuss what they, you know, what their suggested comments are for that area. Again, I'm hoping we're not going to get into too many nitty gritty comments and in terms of, you know, this font needs to be different here, you know, or they were missing a comma there. I don't think that's where we want to go. I don't assume that's you have professionals that are doing all that and are making sure that making sure the grammar is correct.
Oh, if you can just spell in history, please.
All right. Very good. So with that, is there any other business for today? Other items? Okay, so our next meeting is on February 9th, which I don't know if that's before or after the public comment period starts, but we can certainly dive in at that meeting and kind of talk about how we're gonna go through that 30-day period.
We'll certainly coordinate on that timing.
Excellent, perfect. All right, thanks. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Nobody wants to leave. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Gosh.
I thought we were gonna stay here, huh? All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody, and thank you all. Thank you, Commission, for coming.